is there a place for our framework in the West? The answer is yes, there is a need to, I think, heal what is going on in the West. And one way that it can be done is to introduce what we have, frameworks that actually work, right? And it's a matter of informing and educating them. A lot of humility, I think, from the West to acknowledge and accept that there are systems that are not Western that are better, and that what they have is not working. It is broken. So I think it requires a lot of humility, and it also requires someone to educate and articulate what we have very clearly to them. Because what I've noticed when I look at the discourse, we have a lot of great ideas, but they're not really articulated properly to the West, so they're not taken, and they're not really respected or acknowledged because we don't have the right spokespeople. They're not appealing in how they speak and how they think and how they come across. And that's a problem, I think, because we are very proud of what we have, but we're not doing a very good job of transferring or transmitting or teaching the world about it. And people seem to have a kind of a distorted image of a lot of things that are actually Indic and dharmic, and that doesn't help us at all. But I think what we should do as Indians is speak very proudly of what we have, broadcast it to the world, own it, and say this is the system that we have and it works and this is why. And I think we need more people doing that. I don't see a lot of people doing that at all. I mean, the conversations that we are having about feminism is it's very within India, right? I mean, it's Indian speakers talking to other Indian listeners, and that is the conversation. That is it. It never gets out to the world.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to an all new episode of the Indic Paradigm. This is your host, Vineet, and welcome to the Indic Explorer channel. And the guest of today's show is Preeti Uppala. Hi, Preeti.
Namaste, Vineet. Hello, and thank you for having me on your show.
Yeah, welcome to the show. And Preeti is a writer, an author. She's written in multiple international news outlets. She's a geopolitical commentator. She's a spiritualist and an active practitioner of yoga. And she's also been an actress and a model. So how many hats have you worn on that head, Preeti?
Not enough, I guess. There's so many new projects and new endeavors that I continue to get involved in. And in fact, to be honest, like I've done so many things in my life, but my best innings, it hasn't even started. It's about to kick off now, and I'm sure the next few decades I will do so many things, and maybe things that I haven't even thought about so far. So it seems like it's just going to be very exciting. That's for sure.
Nice. I think that's a great attitude to have, right? Like the golden age is going to come. So, Preeti, we are going to talk today about Indic feminism. Feminism, especially in the Western world, has a very different understanding of women's rights and women's issues. And from an Indian dharmic framework, it's a completely different analysis and understanding. So, firstly, just give the audience an overview of the feminist movement in the West, and where do you think Indic feminism, through which derives itself from Indian philosophy, Hindu philosophy, how does it differ from Western feminism?
All right, great question. So the feminist movement here in the West, it started off obviously many decades ago, and it was about equality. It was about being, given agency and space and equality, parity, right? It was the need of the hour because women didn't even have voting rights, and they didn't even have anything, let alone have equal pay for equal work. So this had gone on for a long time. So the feminist movement uh, it was the correct movement for its time, and all of these years as well, it continues to fight for that. However, I think what's happened in the last some decades, I would say, we've seen different waves, and it's sort of got hijacked by other elements, whether that is, I mean, there was somehow now you have LGBTQ slash trans sort of movements kind of almost hijacking it in some ways and trying to be the ambassador and the spokesperson for this feminist movement. You have the Marxist groups, you got all kinds of political social groups that are kind of taken over to impose their own agenda, because it's a great platform. And it's just kind of gone off the deep end. So this a radical version of the feminist movement that I think we see in the West, and this is very problematic because it's not what the original movement was supposed to be, and it's turning into, it's like a snowball. It's getting bigger and bigger, and very soon we're going to have an avalanche, and we won't even see it coming, because I don't think the people in charge can see it coming. I think people like me, myself, or many others who are a step away from it and can see it from outside in, we see what's going on. It's very scary. But obviously, we're not the ones in charge, and I can only share my perspective about it. Somebody who is in the movement or in charge of the movement, only they can really affect the change. So that's what's happening here. So whatever happens here in America, slowly it ripples out to the rest of the world, including India, we're seeing in some ways, which is really, really dangerous. But in America, it's turned into something quite toxic, where we're seeing there's all the blame game. We're seeing women who want nothing to do with men, who think that they don't need men, and they're really wearing the pants, calling all the shots. And then the men, I've noticed, have become very emasculated. You know, they are going overboard to kind of be softer versions of themselves. They're almost ashamed of their masculinity. So it's kind of the gender roles have reversed. It's not working. And if we continue on this path, it's just not going to end well. So that's where this movement is at here. Now, the Indic feminism movement, or Indic feminism, right? It's stayed intact, I think, for thousands of years. Um, we have our own issues. It's not perfect. You know, I think I would be lying if I said it's perfect, because it's not. And there are some thinkers and some authors, some speakers of Indic feminism who like to say that it's perfect with no issues. That's simply not the case. It's got its own problems, I think. And I think if you want to have an honest opinion, you have to address those problems at some point. But that's an internal conversation that we get to have, and only we can heal it and fix it from inside, right? So the West doesn't have any role in anything to do with our feminism. So Indian feminism is special because you don't find a role reversal, and it's all about duty. It's not about rights. Nobody's fighting for rights. You know, they understand that they have rights already, and the duty that the woman has. She just understands. You know, like, yes, she's maybe the breadwinner, maybe she is the executive, but it doesn't matter. She's still a daughter, right? Sister. She's a wife. She's a mother. She's a daughter-in-law. So all of these roles she wears very proudly. She understands that nobody can do those roles. Maybe her staff can survive without her for a day, but her kids cannot. Maybe her mother-in-law cannot. You know, so her home cannot. So it's it's a lot to ask for. I think it's a balancing act, but Indian women inherently can do that job quite effortlessly. And also just their idea of aesthetics, beauty, feminism is it's very intact. It's there. It's natural. It's organic. They dress feminine. They look feminine. They sound feminine. It's very beautiful. It's very attractive, not just to Indian men, but to men around the world. And thankfully, they haven't lost that. In the West, it's kind of lost a little bit. Either it's not there or it's very overt. and it just looks a little tacky. So that's where Indian feminism is at, which is great. Now, you asked me, is there a place for our framework in the West? The answer is yes. There is a need to, I think, heal what is going on in the West. And one way that it can be done is to introduce what we have, frameworks that actually work, right? And it's a matter of informing and educating them on what works in other parts of the world. And I think combined with what's going on in the West and Western ideals and norms, it could work. It really could. But I think that requires a lot. It requires a lot of humility, I think, from the West to acknowledge and accept that there are systems that are not Western that are better, and that what they have is not working. It is broken. So I think it requires a lot of humility, and it also requires someone to educate and articulate what we have very clearly to them. Because what I've noticed when I look at the discourse, we have a lot of great ideas, but they're not really articulated properly to the West, so they're not taken, and they're not really respected or acknowledged because we don't have the right spokespeople. They're not appealing in how they speak and how they think and how they come across. And that's a problem, I think, because we are very proud of what we have, but we're not doing a very good job of transferring or transmitting or teaching the world about it. And people seem to have a kind of a distorted image of a lot of things that are actually Indic and dharmic, and that doesn't help us at all. So there's a lot of glitches there, but in essence, this is what's going on in the West and where we fit in. And I think there is actually a lot of scope for us to, at some point, at least, forget about trying to, make America more dharmic. I don't know about that, but I think what we should do as Indians is speak very proudly of what we have, broadcast it to the world, own it, and say, this is a system that we have and it works and this is why. And I think we need more people doing that. I don't see a lot of people doing that at all. I mean, the conversations that we are having about feminism is very much it's very within India, right? I mean, it's Indian speakers talking to other Indian listeners, and that is the conversation. That is it. It never gets out to the world.
I think you put it rightly, because I think the packaging as well as the messaging in terms of putting it across in a polished, sophisticated way has been a problem for us. But there's a very interesting point you mentioned on emasculation and, emasculation of the male and the projection of power or strength in a woman, right? Like in India, you would women who would be very feminine would still command respect and power. And it also comes from the goddesses in our tradition, right? They have very feminine characteristics, but still they have an aura of power. So this whole thing, where do you think it's going to lead? This whole, the woman having to show that for her to be strong, she has to be a man, which in itself defeats feminism in the first place. And for the man, he has to subdue himself and become, emasculated. Where do you think this is going to lead, this role reversal?
It is a very dangerous game. I think that some groups are playing. You're right. The very fact that a woman needs to be a man to be more powerful itself is very sexist and misogynistic to the core, right? In fact, opposite. For her to be powerful, she needs to be more of a woman, and every man loves that anyway. And in India, yeah, you can be a CEO, but you wear a sari, you look amazing, you speak softly, and or you can be very modern and very sort of elegant and sophisticated as well, but you do command power, and people will respect you, and they respect your ideas, they respect your thoughts, how your mind is, and how you operate, and then what we're seeing in the men is they're becoming they're losing what makes them a man in order to be more of a man, which is very strange. And again, it is not going to work. So this is sort of an interesting uh, place that we are kind of at a fork. If we don't do something quick, I think it's going to really escalate into something that's beyond repair. And in some ways, or some parts of the West, or some places, it's already kind of going there. It's not going to end well. I also fear that some of this is going to come to India, which is the scariest thing. Because if you listen to social science groups in India, you listen to, I mean, we have different kinds of feminists in India, but there are a certain type that are very influenced by the NGOs and so on, right? Those folks will say that there's a real problem in India with female empowerment, and their answer to the problem in India would be, let's bring these Western systems, let's bring the Western idea of feminism to India. So this is the worst case, I think, for India, because you're going to bring in what is not working and what is destroying the Western society to a place where it's actually, things are actually fine, right? For the most part, and you're going to bring it in and you're going to ruin, forget about the West, you're going to ruin the biggest democracy in the world. I don't think the world can really afford that, right? You don't want a country of that many women who are completely lost the plot, and where it's all going haywire. It's not good for India. It's not good for the West. It's not good for anyone, because a lot of Indian women travel all around the world. They work, they have a presence, and they're very much very global. And if something is wrong with how they view themselves and their interaction with their own femininity, that shows, and that's not a good look. And if these women are in positions of power, which more and more we're seeing in all of these great big tech companies, or just big companies in general, they're even in the States, a lot of them are led by very strong Indian American women. The problem is you don't want them to kind of go down the wrong side, because then people will think that everybody in India is like that, and they're not. So we are kind of at a fork, and I think something needs to be done at some point very soon.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have spoken and written a lot about Shakti and its, the influence on Hindu philosophy. So, how do you think Shakti worship as such informs daily lives of Indians and Hindus in terms of their interactions with women and, generally everyday lives? Because we know Shakti is a very important part, the sacred feminine. How does it, what are the underpinnings of that, and how does it inform daily lives?
Yeah, that's a great question. Shakti is definitely the embodiment of the divine feminine essence. And I think we are the only goddess worshipping culture left on the planet. So it's very important that we never lose this amazing tradition. It's funny though, in the West, they use this word goddess a lot, but I think the connotation is for it's something completely different. It's not an actual goddess. There's nothing divine about it, right? In fact, it's very kind of sexualized, and it's used in a very cheap way. But in India, thankfully, thanks to the amazing goddesses in our faith, and we've had for thousands of years, and it's remained intact. Um, one is there's so many goddesses, each has a different quality. So we can take from these goddesses the different qualities. If it's speech and thought and education, it's Saraswati, right? And then act real power is Durga Ma, or if really ferocious to kill the toxicity, it's Kali Mata, right? And then the beauty and the opulence, that's Lakshmi. So I mean, those are just some examples, but we have so many goddesses to 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 take from, and I think just learning about them, their lives, the stories, whether it's mythology or real, it doesn't matter. The point is that there is a moral value in their teachings and in who they are and how they lived, and women can take a lot from that. I think the way we respect the goddesses That's how we respect our elders. That's how we respect our parents and our teachers. I don't see this in the West. I just don't see that sort of adoration and I don't want to say subservience, but just the real respect uh, that children have, I think, for their elders, especially their teachers. That's a beautiful thing. That's a great quality, which I think instills that respect and being humble, which I think will take you a very long way, and you stand out because you really are very different from everybody else. So it affects us in so many ways, I think, that we don't even realize. And I just think the women around the world, if they looked at the qualities of the great female leaders, whether goddesses or actual female leaders that we've had, there's a lot to learn from them. So, this culture of um, just being, um, just elevating the goddess. And, I mean, we ultimately, the man should see the woman as a goddess. Now, that hasn't always happened even in India, but there have been many times where it does happen, and there have been many. It's the fundamental core of our faith, which is so beautiful. I think we need to actualize all of it in its full potential, but the foundation is there, right? The scriptures are there, the doctrines, the ideology is very much there. It's up to us. And many thousands of years ago, for a long time, it was sort of followed perfectly, but we've lost it now a little bit. I think not. It's not lost forever. I think we can still salvage it. And I urge Indian women, especially Sanatani women, to know how rare and special we have it. And I think you should never lose that part of our faith.
Right. And there's something when we were going to do this podcast, there's something that really struck me. The very core of Hindu philosophy basically talks about Atman, consciousness, the Brahman, like all of these concepts are gender neutral, right? There is no, of course, you say that the sacred is when the masculine and the feminine come together and all of that, but at the core of it, these are gender neutral. And in fact, it also takes into consideration, you could have a rebirth as an animal. You could just, because of the karma that you've done in this birth, you go become an animal. So it goes actually one level further, where it actually not just equates men and women, but also all other living things, animals and plants included. So how does that come, this specific philosophy come from the point, come in the standpoint of gender, where this is completely gender neutral, right? So
it is so interesting that sometimes I'll hear conversations here in the West about these concepts, and I think, hey, we already have all of this, in our culture. We've had it for a long time, and it's actually worked very nicely. I mean, the world might not know about it, but it's actually working in motion. I mean, there is a real push, I think, if you've noticed, in the West, to be gender fluid and to be gender neutral in everything, whether it's pronouns or diversity of gender or whatever. And, some of this is kind of going off the deep end, and there are times when it's needed as well. But whatever it is, they're scrambling to make society more fair, I guess, and neutral. But when I look at our culture, it's actually already there, but it's there in a very subtle way, and it's there internally. It's there in the background as the foundation of the very thing. It's not overt. It's not in your face, right? So sometimes even we don't realize that it's there because it's so subtle, and it really encompasses everything, the whole holistic thing. So while here in the West they are trying to be more gender neutral, everything about our faith is gender neutral. I mean, we have temples that are dedicated to women only. We have temples that are dedicated to men. We have temples that are dedicated to the third gender, which
trans people,
that's
yeah.
that's another issue. Again, here there is so much transphobia, or there is so much tension, and yet India is the only country in the world that has an official third gender, and it's not a problem. It's never been a problem. These are very valued members of society. They know their place. They know who they are. There is never any, we've had it for so long. I mean, we could teach the West so many things about on all of these levels. And I think they are Western scholars and a lot of Western people who do explore our tradition, and they find all of these concepts and they're very in awe of them, and they do genuinely speak about it. I think we don't have enough of them, but they are some great ambassadors and good thinkers doing this job. I think we need a lot more, and we need the masses to know about it. It's like some people are in science, some people in academia or spirituality, philosophy will know about all of this, but not the common person on the street, and not like the mass, like around the world kind of thing. It should be common knowledge, I think. It's slowly getting there, I think, which is even without any PR from our end. It's organically, I think the world is finding out. And at a time when many other systems aren't working, this is a system that seems to really work. So it is time for Dharma, I think, to rise and shine, I would say. And I think that's what's going on in the world.
Yeah, and I think it's a very valid point you make. People don't know the wheels in motion, right? These things are unconsciously, subconsciously there, and we don't even think about it. It's almost second nature. Uh, I want to, so we've covered feminism from a macro perspective, but there's an interesting clip that I saw in your channel, and I wanted to cover this from a micro perspective as well. The question of what does the feminine want from the masculine? I thought that was a very interesting thing that I saw, and I would like you to kind of delve deeper into that, because at an individual level, where do you think men get women wrong or don't get them fully, and what do women actually want? The $1,000,000 question.
Yeah, this is I wrote some pieces on this, but I did a very interesting interview with a very popular uh, radio show called Mountaintop Show, I guess, podcast. And this was his most downloaded episode. I think we had like 50,000 downloads in the first week or something ridiculous like that. It was one of his most popular, and he was really an amazing host. And we had such a great, and I'll give you the link. Maybe you can post it. It's on my channel actually. And it was really great engagement, very dynamic, very fun. And we really wanted to kind of go deeper, and it's the small things, it's things like the details. Women have a great memory, they never forget. And it's all about the details. We don't care about if you're rich, good looking, successful, whatever. We know when you like us, we know when you care about us, we know when you respect us or not. We'll go along with it sometimes, even when we know that it's not there. But in our heart of hearts, we know, and ultimately it will come out. But the details are so important, and then to remember she's the boss, especially when in the beginning, when you want something from her. I think there's too many men who want to prove that they're the boss or the man, the alpha thing that never works. It's such a turnoff, right? So there's so many things like that. But ultimately what the divine feminine wants from the divine masculine is to be listened to be understood, to be loved, to be respected, to be treated as one, equal. So that's very important. I also touched on how communication is key. I think, look, no relationship is perfect, no marriage is perfect, but the key to any good relationship, especially for longevity, is you have to communicate, no matter what the situation is like. And honesty is the best policy. You will have many ups and downs, you'll have many challenges, but if you communicate honestly and clearly throughout, that makes for a very, very good grounding, I think, for a great, successful relationship. and expectations as well. I think men uh, are interesting. They will actually put up with a lot, but authenticity is important, and give them a chance as well. Don't sort of write them off. There are so many different points. People think it's difficult. Like what women want is the eternal question. I think many women don't even know what they want, or they think they want something, but what they want and what they need are two different things. And a good man can show them the mirror for sure. For sure he can, and they will have to be honest with themselves and see that. But yeah, there's men do a lot of things wrong, I think, and they can be a lot more successful with women if they, instead of being big and flashy, just be more simple, be honest, be kind, be loving. That ultimately goes a long way. You will be surprised, and as far as the woman goes, yes, beauty and initial attraction is important, but beyond that, they want something more. They want to know that you're a good person, that you genuinely care about them, and that you're not difficult. And there's a few things that men look for as well, and women don't pay any attention to that. So they play it up. They play up aspects that they think the man wants to see, and that's not really what he wants. Men are funny. They'll say they want a 10. They'll settle for a 4. Trust me. They say a lot of things, but what they're willing to put up with is really quite large and enormous. But women don't know that, and they are, they will try to be what they think the man wants them to be, and like neither person is actually being very honest here. They're both deceiving each other and themselves. It's like and this is not a game. Don't treat it like a game. Just, I think even in India this happens, but people just treat the whole thing as a game, keeping score. This is my conquest. This is what I can get, and that never ends well. Because one day you will find someone that you really like, and if you treat it as a game, your game will be it will be exposed, and the other person will not be interested, because they're not feeling any love and any warmth. They just see you as a player. And another thing is, I noticed that there are books and workshops on like it's men teaching other men how to score, or how to get a woman's attention, or how to get a woman to be interested in you. That, I think, you're playing a con game with yourself, because you're basically learning how to trick a woman. And although there are some simple things that are effective, and certainly you can get her attention, you can probably get a phone number, but it's not real, and it won't go beyond like a couple of dates or whatever. You're trying to game it, and this is anything to do with the heart is not a game. And women aren't that foolish. They know when they're being played, so if you want real love, that's not the way to go. I think men need to realize, trying to trick a woman into liking them is not the way. Get the woman to actually like you by being a good person, because a nice guy always finishes first. Actually, he ends up in the right place ultimately. So just be a good human being.
Nice. And to be fair to all the women, I don't think too many men also know what they want. So
They don't. That's
yeah.
true.
But like, since we were talking about Indic feminism, I think there is a larger problem at play, Preeti, and I want you to come into this, in that it's not just the fact that they don't understand India and its, Indian feminism. Largely, I think there is a lack of understanding of Indian culture and dharma itself, right? So I wanted to understand from you, especially because you've been you've been in the West and outside India for a really long time. What has been the Hindu lived experience in the diaspora? And secondly, despite geopolitically, from that perspective as well, because India and Western countries in Europe as well as the United States have been allies geopolitically at least for a decade or more, easily. Why has that not resulted in them having a better understanding? Why has that not changed the situation as far as Indian culture and its understanding goes, right? Like, they probably understand Japan much better and they've been allies, but that's not happened to India. So
very, very good point. I'll start with the geopolitical stuff first. Yes. Look, if we look since independence, yes, for a large chunk of that, we were non-aligned, or there were times when we were even like with the US, our relationship has been a little interesting. There were adversaries kind of, there were times where we weren't in their camp at all. We weren't in their good books at all, and neither were they in ours. So that's understandable that they have no interest or they don't understand. But like you said, at least in the last couple of decades, certainly in the last 10 years, the India-US relationship is, I think, been one of the most important ones, if not the most important one. And moving forward in the next 50 years, I predict that that is the most important two greatest powers that we need, I think, just for global peace, to keep the balance of power in check, and to have the most optimal world out there. I think you need a strong India, you need a strong US, and they need to work together. And now we have that great strategic partnership, the defense, nuclear part, everything, and on every level, trade, business. Indian Americans are doing incredibly well. Even India. Forget the mainstream media, but the image and perception of India in the West, ground level, people, just your everyday Americans, it's really positive. When they think of India, they think Bollywood, food, uh, beautiful women, technology, Silicon Valley, yoga, meditation, spirituality, vegetarianism, everything that's positive. And their doctor is probably Indian, their accountant is probably Indian. Every single aspect of the Indian American experience is positive for America. So this is fantastic. And around the world, I've been to 100 countries. No matter where I go, everybody, they love India, they love Indians, they have this incredible feeling. I was very impressed. I was like, wow, this is something else. So that's all fantastic. The problem is we haven't really done a great job at marketing ourselves, of our pushing our narrative. Everything that has happened so far, as far as India is concerned, has been organic. Now it's good because it's authentic, but anything natural, I guess. It's real, but it's very slow. It's very slow. It's taken 75 years, for the world to finally wake up to a country called India and what it offers, which is stupid because 75 years ago we were really offering a lot of these same things, right? And in the last, we've been around for thousands of years. We've always been there in the world. So a lot of the blame lies on us as well. You mentioned Japan. Yes, um, Americans are much more familiar with Japanese culture and customs than India for so many reasons. There are a lot of Japanese in America, more than Indians, I think, and they've been here for longer, but it's more than that. I think sushi and Japanese cuisine is one of the most popular in the world, definitely in America. Indian food is also very popular around the world and even in America, but not to the same level that it is sushi or Japanese food. I think they have pushed their soft power a lot better than we have. Our culture is much more richer and intricate and diverse than any other in the world, but we have not presented it like that, and we have not showcased it. So the blame is on us. I don't think we can blame anybody. Even many Indians don't know the richness of their own culture. So what are you going to expect the American person without no passport? What are they going to know, right, about this foreign culture? So the problem is us. And when mainstream media distorts our culture, I think there's not enough pushback. from the diaspora as well as from India. And it's happening a little bit now, but not enough. So we, I think, need to do a much better job at managing our narrative, of really pushing ourselves out there in the world. We have great soft power, but we don't showcase it. We don't sort of proudly wear it. And the government of India, this is the MEA's job, I think, or the culture ministry or whoever, they are doing an awful job, I think, of really putting India on the map. They do a lot of things, but those things aren't effective. And those things are disjointed, smaller independents, different things going on, and there's no through line. And at the end of the day, nobody knows, right? We will have our think tanks, we have our panels, we have these cultural events, and we invite a whole bunch of people. It's just, it goes nowhere. People come and enjoy. Even a lot of Westerners love to come to India. They love everything about the Indian like system, and all these Indian events and the government events and stuff. It's fun, but there's no, like, we don't expect anything from them. We don't ask for anything, and we don't get anything. So I think our sort of whole the diplomacy approach needs to be very different. And I'd like to see it change, I think, soon, while the iron is hot and while the world is really hungry for something. Like, this is a time when I think we need to sort of put ourselves out there.
Right. In fact, there is a interesting contrast here. China is geopolitically it's an adversary, but Chinese people, they have a pretty decent, not like at a high level, but they have a pretty decent understanding of Indian culture. And they are pretty respectful also.
Yes.
They might see India as an adversary, but they don't see, that doesn't translate into what they feel about Indian culture. And probably it's the Buddhist connection. I don't know what it is, but I've generally seen they are
Yes.
very respectful, and they see Indians as a civilizational equal.
Yes.
Which
yes.
is why they feel threatened. Which is a different.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Even in my own and I've been to China many times. When I went to China, all I received was love, and just people being so excited that I was from India. The adversarial bit is between the governments, I would say, and maybe the militaries. I don't think it's people to people. In fact, I think we have more issues with them than they do with us from a person to person thing, right? They genuinely like a lot of the philosophical aspects. The Buddhist connection is one, but it's many other things. They love Bollywood as well. They love Indian women. I know Chinese men, they always are in awe of Indian women. I've noticed that, and they like anything that's Indian, our food. And the general attitude towards India is actually really respectful. And it's true. I think, in fact, we get more respect from them than maybe perhaps what we show them, which is interesting. And they understand our culture a lot better than the West, who is supposed to be an ally. Um, and it is interesting. And at some point, I wish we were friends. Like, I imagine the two biggest countries in the world in terms of population and militaries and growing economies. Imagine if we were the best of friends. Like, what if China was? What if Russia? Like, it was more. It was like Russia. The Russia India connection was the same as the China India connection. Or imagine if Russia was a very, very rich country. I think the world would be a very different place now. And even if India was the same, because of its connection and its dynamic relationship with these different nations, it is sad to see that we, and I don't think this is from our side so much as it's an assault, whether it's the border conflict or it's, an administration that sees us as a threat. We don't want to see them as a threat. We want to get along with everybody. But if they do see us as a threat, and they've taken up all the measures to defeat that threat, then of course we have to protect ourselves and defend ourselves, which we do. Um, I'm hoping in the future things will change. I don't see it happening anytime soon. You'd have to see a real change in their political system for that, I think. And I mean, I could add the same thing about Pakistan as well. But Pakistan is a very small player in the world. Um, it's irrelevant what happens between India and Pakistan in terms of our connection with them. But I think the India-China dynamic is a very important one. Yeah, and also I want to add one more thing. So China is adversarial to the US and the West. However, the US understands Chinese culture
Exactly.
much more
Much
than
better.
Indian culture was supposed to be an ally. I mean,
Absolutely.
here every strip mall has a Chinese restaurant. Everybody knows about acupuncture. Everybody knows about kung fu, jujitsu, Chinese arts, Chinese
Zen
medicine is,
Buddhism.
I know, and they actually love Chinese culture. Chinese food is his number one takeaway. So even though China is this great big enemy, the soft power of China is incredible. They are the masters of soft power. I think with what I mean, who they are in the world, and what they can do, and yet they can still push their soft power, and their soft power is actually accepted, completely accepted, and fully acknowledged. They have a lot of pride in their culture. They keep talking about their own civilizational history, which they do, considering they're at least 5,000 years, right? So they somehow have managed to really put their narrative, their cultural narrative forward, I think, which has been accepted globally. And we have not.
Yeah, I mean, the Confucius Institute operates all around the world, right?
Yes.
But yeah, so how do you think has been the diaspora experience, like, as Hindus? How has that been? Like living and working there and studying there.
Mm-hmm.
How generally do you see people, you know, like how are those interactions informed by?
So I have two experiences. One is my own personal experience, and one is I think what I see other people in the diaspora uh, facing. My personal experience, I think, is very different to what many others in the diaspora experience, because coming as an exchange student, coming right directly from India, opposed to where I came from, which is from Australia, which is, a Western country itself. And I studied in Australia. I have my degrees there. And I have been a student here as well in America, but it's very different, I think. And when I really came as an Australian, I think, rather than an Indian. So my personal experience has been very effortless and very no issues, very seamless. I'm just another Aussie in America, I guess. But I've noticed and observed in the diaspora it's very different. And different people will have different experiences. I think ultimately it's who you are. You bring yourself to the experience as well. I think there are some Indians who um, don't assimilate fully, or maybe they're expecting the worst and perhaps they have a strange experience. And then there are many others who completely immerse themselves, and they have a wonderful time. The diaspora has done very well for themselves. We are the most educated, wealthy, and successful ethnic group in America, which says a lot. And the comparison, I think, is we our the median income for Indians is double what the national average is, and even the number of people that have degrees, even master's degrees and PhD degrees, is double uh, or more than the national average. So I mean, there's such an enormous gap between how well Indians are doing and how not well the rest of America is doing, which is interesting. So they have done well for themselves, which is good. Traditionally, I think they always thought that, for example, they always thought that the Democratic Party in America is the party for them because that was the party that did push for immigration and diversity. Many decades it did do that. Now things have changed a lot. Now we have different lobbies, I think, within the DNC that run the show. And somehow India has become the punching bag here in some ways. And we've seen some unpleasant statements made by them that we don't appreciate. So the diaspora experiences, um, there's different types. One is they're asleep. They don't know what's going on. A lot of these folks are in the Bay Area. They do extremely well for themselves, and they just don't have a clue about the political system in India. They don't know what's going on within the DNC, for example. Like, they don't see what we see. They don't think there's anything wrong. They think everything is just hunky dory. So that's not the majority of Indian Americans, I would say. Then there's a small group, but rising, who see something very insidious happening. They're not happy. They have already moved away. A lot of these people have joined the Republican Party. A lot of them are independent. They're moving right. They're not happy with what's going on, and they want a very different reality. They're vocal about it. So they're smaller, but they're increasing, and they're getting a lot of their voice is getting louder. And then there are the folks who deep down they do want to be more vocal, but to keep face in society, they just cannot openly come out and say things that they really want to say. So they're trapped, I would say. So there's a small amount like that, and I feel for them because they just can't be what they naturally want to be without rocking the boat, I think. And their careers are at stake, um, and they will the backlash I think they will get from their own society or their own diaspora can be quite negative. So to save all of that, and they have children that they want to send to Ivy League schools, they want a retirement plan, they want to be respected in society. So for all of that, they have to just either keep quiet or just toe the line that everybody's towing. And it's very bad because I think what Indians have gone through, this 1,000 years of oppression, has made us very individualistic. We only look out for ourselves. It's not that we're selfish people, but I think our own experience, historical experience, has taught us to just take care of yourself, right? And we have only space for that, it seems. So we have to do what is right for us because nobody else is going to do it for you. So there's these different kinds of Indian experiences. Now, as far as students go, again, you have many students who are clueless about what's going on in India. They don't know about their culture. They don't know about their faith. They don't really see the cracks and the landmines in what's going on. They think everything is fine, and then there's a small group of students who know exactly what's going on. They are vocal, but there's a backlash against them, and they see the rap, and it's bad. And I think there's a small number of students who really experience this Hindu phobia in a very ugly way, and they're vocal about it. They push back, but I think the resistance is too much. So that is the most uncomfortable. It's not the majority of students, I would say, but whatever that experience is I think the ugliest. And that narrative is coming out more and more. More and more kids are talking about it. We have some alliances, I think, that deal specifically with that. And I think this is a Pandora's box. On the surface, everything looks fine. When you open it, everything comes out, and you see all the muck for what it is. And the deeper you go, the stickier it gets. And really at the bottom, it's all gunk. And then you see real bigotry, real racism, and it's almost like, damn, I mean, there's this serious kind of conspiracy against us, and we're like the most wanted, and what is going on? This is, and some of this is, we want to see it, so it's there, we see it, and other times it's really there. Uh, so there are all these different experiences. I think they're all valid, they're all real. I do think that for better or for worse, it's important to have these conversations because there's a lot of people asleep who think everything is just fine, and they need to know that everything is not fine. And it's early days, but all of this can turn very ugly. And we don't want that. I think our society has contributed too much to this great country, for us to be like, we are not the bad guy here. There are many other groups that are very problematic, and we should not be treated as a bad guy. So I think we need to sort of really step up and make sure that that doesn't happen.
Yeah. And also, this whole individualism, I think, stems from the fact that, at least in India, they are not individualistic, right? That sense of community somewhat has disappeared. So they kind of go into this system of, looking out for themselves when they go abroad. Probably that's what is happening. But I think with that, we come to the end of our conversation. It was a fascinating chat, Preeti. Thank you so much for giving time. And with that, we come to the end of the show. Until next time, guys, always remember, Dharma rocks.
Yes.
See you around.
Thank you. Namaste.